If someone tells you that you can build your AI SaaS in 2 weeks for a tiny budget, I actually wouldn't instantly say they're lying, but I would assume they're talking about a demo, not a real product. Because in 2026, building a software is genuinely faster than it used to be. AI helps developers move quicker, it helps teams explore ideas faster, and it actually makes shipping the first version feels almost unfairly easy. But the moment you want something that's production ready, something that's secure, tested, stable, and able to scale, the work changes. And that's what we are talking about today. What does a custom SaaS with AI features actually cost in 2026, and why it's so hard to get the straight answer? Let me start with the big picture. AI has changed the speed of development, but it hasn't removed complexity. It's like building the first draft of a house, which is actually faster now because you have better tools. But the foundation, the plumbing, the electricity, the safety checks, that's actually still the real work, and you don't want to rush that part. In fact, when teams move faster, you often need even more discipline because you can also create problems faster. So when people ask, what does it cost? The actual honest answer here is, it depends on what kind of products you're building, how serious it needs to be, and what stage you are actually in. And most founders skip that part. They jump straight into numbers before they've clarified what actually they're really building. So here is a simple way to think about it. Before we talk about budget, you need to know what you're trying to ship. Are you trying to actually validate your idea quickly? Or are you trying to sell a real product to paying customers? Or are you trying to build something which is enterprise ready when security, compliance, and everything in between is non-negotiable? Those three things look similar on a pitch deck, but in reality, they're completely different builds. Let's use a real example here. Imagine you are building a SaaS product in healthcare and you want a few AI features that help your assistants work faster, reduce mistakes, or get better outcomes. If you're building this from scratch, the bigger effort at the beginning is not coding. It's actually thinking through how everything works. It's understanding the user flow, the data flow, and the risks. It's answering questions like what information goes in, what comes out, what can you see, and what happens when the AI is wrong. And this is why the number one thing that affects costs is clarity. Not how good your developers are, it's about clarity. Because the clearer your requirements are, the less time gets wasted, the fewer mistakes happen, and the less your budget gets eaten by rework. This is also why we always start with a product requirement document. And when I say PRD, I don't mean a single deck. I mean a written document that actually explains the product in plain language. What it does, who is it for, and how it makes money. What the key screens are, what the AI feature actually does, and what needs to happen behind the scenes, what needs to be tracked, what can go wrong. The reason it needs to be written is very simple. In 2026, we use the document as the source of truth for the project, and we also use it with AI tools to speed up the planning, specifications, and tasks breakdown. A good PRD actually turns estimation from guessing into something structured. Now let's talk about what actually makes the price goes up or down. Most people assume the cost is mainly about how many screens you have, but in reality, cost usually comes from complexity. It comes with integrations or reliability. Complexity is when the feature sounds simple, but the logic is not. Integrations are when your product has to work with other systems. For example, payments, CRM, systems in healthcare, calendar tools, identity providers. Reliability is everything you need, so the product doesn't break when real users start relying on it. AI changes the speed of building, but it also changes what users expect, because when you demo something AI-powered, people assume it's smart and smooth. They won't accept it's an MVP if the product feels unreliable, slow, or unsafe. So the bar goes up, and that brings us to the stages, because this is where the pricing becomes more predictable. If you're building an MVP, you're actually usually trying to get your first version in people's hands, learn quickly, and prove there is some demand. This is not the polished final product. It's a focus built around one core workflow and one meaningful AI feature. In 2026, an MVP is typically between 10 to 30,000 depending on complexity. And the interesting part is that with AI tools, it's also possible to try to build your own basic MVP for under 10,000 euros, especially if you're using templates, starter kits, and you keep the scope very tight. That do-it-yourself route can work if your goal is learning and validation, and if you're okay with being rough around the edges. You start improving the UX, adding the second and third model, building proper admin tools, and setting up monitoring and error handling. and usually adding the first serious integrations here. V2 is actually typically starting around 30,000 euro and goes even beyond 60,000 euro, depending on how many modules and integrations you need and how production ready it has to be. Anything beyond that part usually means you're entering a more complex SaaS or enterprise territory. That's when you start needing heavier security, role management, audit logs, more advanced architecture, and sometimes compliance work, especially in regulated industries like healthcare. At that point, it's less about building a feature. It's more about building infrastructure that can support a bigger business. Now let's talk about something people underestimate in 2026: AI costs after launch. Because AI is rarely a one-time cost. Even if the feature is just using an API, the costs change and the data of the usage. If your product grows, token usage grows. If you add more AI features, the bill grows. And many companies get surprised because their AI spend is not predictable like a flat SaaS subscription. It can spike, so when you estimate your product, you don't just ask what does it cost to build. You actually have to ask what does it cost to run. And this is where a lot of founders get caught. They budget for development, but they also forgot about maintenance, infrastructure, monitoring, bug fixes, and things like security updates, refactoring. Custom SaaS is actually not a one-off purchase. It's product you own. And owning it means maintaining it. So if you want a simple takeaway from this video, it's this. In 2026, AI makes it easier and cheaper to ship the first version. But reliability, security, and ability to scale still requires a lot of work. The best way to control the costs is to be extremely clear about what you're building, what stage you are in, and what must be included from day one versus what can come later. If you want to see how we price these builds, you can also check our pricing on our website of codelevate.com. And if you want a fixed price estimate for your specific idea, you can actually also fill in our intake form, and we'll come back with a clear scope and a fixed range. So if you're building something and you're unsure what stage you are actually in, comment MVP or V2 and I will tell you what I would focus on first. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next week.